So I've used Unity for a lot of my game dev journey. That's about 4+ years now. I've used it for class projects, personal projects, and a little bit in professional games. And I know I'm a bit late to the Unity news, but I realized it's time to get back into game dev. So I decided to teach myself Unreal Engine 5. A quick background about me. Hi, I'm Amin. I'm a game designer with 4+ years experience making games. I also have industry experience as a QA and a game designer. In fact, I was working my dream job as a game designer for a AAA company up until about 2 years ago. But that all came crashing down when my whole team and I were caught in the first wave of game industry layoffs that year. Like, look at this bar. All those numbers. All those people laid off. That's me. I was one of those. And it sucked because it was almost impossible to bounce back from that. Countless resume revisions, dozens of interviews, hours spent searching job boards and messaging recruiters for opportunities. But this also made me realize how nerfed I had become in my design and technical abilities working in the industry. I hadn't created any of my own projects for a few years, and I was honestly starting to forget a lot of what I had done. So I decided to start creating my own games again and creating these devlogs for them to try and retrain my design muscles and create cool games. This video is more of a devlog of me trying to create a small game in Unreal Engine 5. So I had an idea for a game where you play as a tank and you have to try and eliminate other enemy tanks in the level. Genius, I know. So the initial idea was to put a twist on the PS2 game Road Trip Adventure. I played so many hours of that game. I thought it could be like that, but sprinkled with a little bit of violence. My current skill level was no way near where I needed to be to create the type of game I actually wanted to make. Because if I wanted it like Road Trip Adventure, I would have had to do a dialogue system, quest system, a giant level. You get what I mean. So I kept it simple and made sure the main mechanics for this game would be moving and shooting. One of the first things I set up was a base tank class because I knew I wanted the enemies to be the same type and have the same functionality as the player. In the base class, I added functions for shooting, a health system, and what to do when it dies, along with all the components to make it a tank like the colliders and meshes. In the player class, I added a camera and movement functionality which I binded to user input from the mouse and keyboard and also a gamepad. For the input, I created a new input mapping context and mapped input actions I wanted to use for the player. I wanted it to be simple, so I used the WS keys to accelerate forward and back and the AD keys to rotate your view. The mouse would control the turret by moving left and right and then firing missiles with the left click. Then I also mapped these to a controller, so the left joystick would move you forward and back, the right joystick would let you rotate left and right, and the back right trigger would let you shoot your missile. I did run into some issues with the player controller when reversing and turning. So I had it when you hold left, the tank rotates to the left by moving negative degrees to the current position and positive degrees to the right when you hold D. But when you reverse while turning, the direction stays the same, so it was turning to the left and reversing but not going in that direction. It got so bad I had to draw a diagram for myself to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Turns out I was right, and the way I was doing it was wrong. I fixed it by adding a turn float which gave it a value of 1 or -1 depending on if it was reversing, and then multiplied the delta value by that. Next I wanted to add the controls for the tank turret. I binded my input actions to the turret to the horizontal value given by the mouse or the right joystick on the controller. This would then give me a positive or negative value depending on the direction it's going in. I then added that to a delta value along with a float variable to control the overall speed and add it to the turret's rotation. The turret rotation is a bone in the skeletal mesh that was used for the turret. Finally, I had to get the turret value in the tank's animation blueprint and use it to update the bone's rotation. This took me a few days to figure out. A lot of it was understanding what the hell an animation blueprint was, but I figured it out in the end. After I got the turret working, I wanted to set up the basic functionality for shooting a missile. So I added a new socket to the tank's skeletal mesh and drew a debug sphere at that location so I could get a visual of where it would shoot from. Once I had the correct location to shoot the missile from, I created a simple missile blueprint with a mesh and a projectile movement component. This way I can call spawn actor in the tank class to spawn the missile when I shoot. The problem was it was shooting in the wrong direction. I did some digging and I realized that the asset I was using for the missile had its origin point much lower than where the actual mesh was. And it was also off by 90 degrees on the x-axis. Luckily, Unreal has a modeling mode which let me change the transform of the mesh and rotate the axis. That's definitely a useful feature to have, otherwise I would have had to use a different software to edit it and then import it back into the engine. Next, I wanted to do a bit of level design, but mostly I wanted to add some objects to the level so it didn't look so empty. I added a small ramp to the level to see what it looked like when the player went up, but because I had frozen the actor's Z position, after you went up you were stuck floating at that Z value, which reminded me I had disabled gravity back when I was using colliders to move around. So I checked the simulate physics box and adjusted the weight value, and I got the cartoony gravity I was looking for. But in the end, I decided not to have any ramps or vertical elevations in the level, as I didn't add a way for players to shoot vertically. So that was the player's turret aiming sorted. Now I had to figure out how to get it working for the enemies. Initially I used the same method as the player turret with a delta value that's added to the current socket rotation. For that I had to do some vector math to get the direction that points to the player from the enemy tank, and then add that to the rotation. And yeah, you can see it kinda works here, but there's a huge offset. I learned later this is because the tank's world rotation on the x-axis affected the value it was giving for the direction to look at the player. After a lot of googling, I found the best way to do this was to use the normalized delta rotator to find the difference between the angle of the enemy and the direction of the player. Then I used f_interp2 for the current rotation value to the normalized one for a smooth rotation. This was honestly a lot of work, and I think I'll split this up into 2 videos. In the next devlog, I'll talk about adding movement to the enemy tanks, creating the UI, the levels, and trying to add breakable objects. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and drop a comment with your experience in Unreal Engine. Are you new like me, or do you have years of experience? And if you have any tips to share in the comments, that'd be great. And be sure to subscribe for more game dev content. I swear I'll get better at this. Okay, bye!